Certain individuals experience a peculiar sensation, a quiet certainty that this lifetime might be their final round on Earth. It's as if they've wandered these paths countless times before and are now standing at the threshold of something far greater. Instead of imagining reincarnation as an endless carousel, Neville Goddard's teachings suggest it's more like an intricate system designed with an exit. Some souls, after countless experiences, finally approach the moment of release from the cycle of rebirth. Throughout his interpretations, Goddard illustrated existence not as a punishment, but as a rich opportunity for self-discovery, where each life served as a classroom. After many lessons, a soul eventually reaches completion. But how can one recognize such a pivotal stage? The signs are subtle, yet they carry profound meaning. Many spiritual philosophies describe the journey of consciousness through repeated births and deaths, moving steadily toward a grand realization. Interestingly, modern scientific theories, especially in quantum mechanics, echo this ancient understanding. If time is merely an illusion and awareness surpasses physical boundaries, then perhaps lives are not sequential, but overlapping expressions of a single being. Neville Goddard often spoke about transcending the illusion of time altogether. Souls nearing the end of their earthly experiences may not exhibit signs of spiritual superiority, but rather awaken to the realization that reality itself is a carefully constructed stage. One of the clearest indications of nearing completion is the feeling of being somewhat detached from the human story. You participate fully, building relationships, striving for goals, engaging with daily life, yet simultaneously a part of you watches from a quiet distance. It's as if you are playing a role in a drama that no longer fits your true essence. This isn't about disillusionment or emotional withdrawal. Instead, it's a deep-seated awareness that the physical world is only a small fragment of existence. While many around you chase status, wealth, or recognition with fierce dedication, you see these pursuits as fleeting illusions, important within their context, but ultimately insignificant in the grand design. Neville Goddard referred to this internal pull as a yearning for one's original state, a distant but undeniable memory of true beingness. It's not about running away from life. It's about remembering what was once forgotten. Some consciousness researchers today propose that individuality is nothing more than a focus of awareness, a temporary lens, not the ultimate reality. Those nearing their final incarnation aren't lost or broken. They are the ones standing closest to awakening. As this realization deepens, everyday life begins to feel less like a rigid structure and more like a vivid dream. Nothing is permanently owned, and your connection to this physical dimension softens. You remain active in the world, yet no longer fully of it. If the journey of reincarnation exists to cultivate understanding, then perhaps the final realization isn't about gathering more knowledge. It's about seeing through the illusion of needing to gather anything at all. Have you always sensed a quiet observer within yourself, one who watches, loves, participates, yet never fully clings? If so, you might be glimpsing reality through the eyes of a soul preparing to step beyond the cycles of existence. Another unmistakable sign that a soul is nearing its final earthly journey is the frequent encounter with powerful déjà vu experiences. These are not the brief flashes of familiarity that most people occasionally encounter. Instead, they manifest as vivid recollections, often accompanied by intricate knowledge that seems impossible to have acquired in this current lifetime. Neville Goddard's insights propose that individuals approaching liberation experience a thinning of the veil, separating different realities. In these moments, fragments of other lives, other expressions of consciousness, leak into the present awareness, offering glimpses of the vast, interconnected nature of existence. These occurrences aren't random quirks of brain chemistry. Instead, they serve as windows into a broader field of simultaneous lifetimes. You might predict conversations moments before they happen, feel at home in places you've never physically visited, or display talents that were never consciously learned. These moments hint that the divisions between various incarnations are dissolving. Some modern physicists suggest that time isn't a straight line, but more like a boundless ocean of possibilities happening all at once. From this perspective, your past lives are not behind you but happening concurrently, each one a different expression of the same deeper self. As the journey nears its conclusion, your awareness becomes more fluid, no longer locked tightly onto one particular existence. Brief flashes of other realities emerge naturally, unbidden, as the soul begins to remember its true timeless nature. What once felt separate and linear begins to overlap, blending the borders between lives, moments, and identities. This state is not confusion but a kind of awakening, a soft unraveling of the illusion of being trapped in a single story. It's as if reality is gently reminding you that you have always been much more than one name, one face, one life. A profound transformation in the way death is perceived often marks those nearing the completion of their earthly cycle. Unlike the common fear that shadows most human thoughts about mortality, you might feel a quiet acceptance, an understanding that physical death is merely a subtle transition rather than a terrifying end. Neville Goddard's teachings suggest that those advancing toward final liberation carry deep, though often unconscious, memories of passing through death before, not as endings full of sorrow, but as simple shifts into different modes of existence. These memories soften the primal survival instincts, allowing peace to replace fear. You may find yourself discussing topics related to mortality with unusual calmness, unaffected by the anxiety that often grips others. You might even catch fleeting impressions, faint but clear, that you have crossed the threshold of death many times before, moving from one experience to another like changing garments. This altered perspective profoundly shapes the way you approach life itself. Without the looming fear of annihilation, the focus naturally shifts from survival to presence. Life stops being a desperate race against time and becomes an opportunity to experience the moment as it truly is, without the shadow of inevitable loss. The absence of dread allows for genuine freedom, a freedom to choose actions based on authenticity rather than anxiety. This inner tranquility becomes a quiet guide, enabling you to live not for avoidance of death, but for the fullness of each breath, each connection, each fleeting second. Rather than mourning life's impermanence, you begin to celebrate its vividness, understanding that the spirit behind the form is untouched by endings. In this awareness, the fear of death loosens its grip, replaced by a gentle familiarity with change itself. Another clear signal that a soul is nearing its final earthly expression is the undeniable increase in synchronicities, those extraordinary alignments that seem far too precise to dismiss as coincidence. For you, life may feel less like a random series of events and more like a responsive conversation, with existence itself subtly answering your thoughts and feelings. Neville Goddard spoke often about the creative power of consciousness. As awareness sharpens, the world around you begins reflecting that inner clarity. You might notice thinking of someone moments before receiving their message or seeking an answer, only to have it appear effortlessly in your path. Guidance seems to arrive not through struggle, but through natural flow, unlike chance happenings that everyone experiences from time to time. These patterns carry a sense of purpose. They feel intentional, orchestrated by a deeper intelligence that you are not separate from, but actively participating with. Scientific discussions around quantum mechanics, particularly the observer effect, mirror this ancient insight. Awareness shapes what is perceived. Reality doesn't just unfold independently, it responds. For those nearing the end of the reincarnation cycle, this shift is unmistakable. Events, people, and opportunities appear with a synchronicity that feels almost choreographed. It's not magic or fantasy, but recognition of the intimate connection between your consciousness and the unfolding story of your life. Instead of viewing the universe as something happening to you, it becomes evident that you and reality are weaving experiences together, moment by moment. Synchronicities become confirmation, quiet nudges reminding you that you are aligned with something greater than individual will. Each meaningful coincidence strengthens this awareness, revealing that what once seemed accidental is actually a dance between seen and unseen forces. You're no longer just a character following a script. You're co-writing it as you awaken to the greater reality beneath the surface of things. One of the most striking transformations experienced by those nearing their final human cycle is the natural diminishment of desire. Where once ambition, longing, and external achievements fueled endless striving, now there arises a profound sense of sufficiency, a recognition that nothing outside yourself can truly complete you. Neville Goddard emphasized that as consciousness evolves, the soul releases its attachments not through force or discipline, but through an organic realization that wholeness has always been within. The frantic search for success, validation, wealth, or affection gradually falls away, replaced by a quiet certainty that fulfillment isn't found through acquisition. You may notice that your goals emerge differently now, not driven by hunger or lack, but blossoming naturally from presence. Effort becomes less about reaching somewhere and more about expressing something already complete within you. To others, this shift might appear strange, even concerning. In a world addicted to chasing more, stepping out of that race can be misunderstood as apathy. Yet beneath this surface lies profound maturity, a soul no longer caught in karmic loops of craving and aversion. Neville Goddard described how attachment to outcomes binds consciousness to the wheel of reincarnation. Letting go doesn't mean abandoning life. It means moving through it with freedom, creating without clinging, acting without desperation, without the ceaseless drive to get somewhere. Your energy becomes available for deeper, more authentic expressions of existence. Actions arise not from emptiness needing to be filled, but from abundance overflowing naturally. This inner transformation reshapes the entire way you move through the world. You participate fully, yet you are not enslaved by results. You love, create, build, and dream, all while rooted in a peace that no accomplishment or failure can touch. In this state, life becomes less about reaching milestones and more about experiencing each unfolding moment as inherently whole. Another profound shift among those nearing the end of their earthly cycles is the growing recognition that physical reality is not the ultimate ground of existence. Instead of simply believing this idea intellectually, you begin to experience it firsthand, a subtle but undeniable awareness that what appears solid and immutable is in truth a fleeting projection of something far deeper. Neville Goddard often pointed to the understanding that the world we perceive is not the true reality, but a reflection shaped by consciousness itself. Through small moments, a glance at the stars, the hush between words, the sensation of being both here and elsewhere at once, the facade of the physical world begins to shimmer, revealing its transitory nature. Science, too, whispers similar truths. Theories such as the holographic principle suggest that our three-dimensional experience might arise from information encoded beyond what our senses can detect. Ideas from the simulation hypothesis hint that reality may be more akin to a grand construct than an absolute foundation. For those nearing their soul's completion, these concepts are not abstract philosophies. They are living realities. You may find yourself noticing how your perceptions actively shape your experiences. The world no longer feels entirely external. It bends, shifts, and responds depending on the lens through which you observe it. Objects lose some of their rigidity. Boundaries between self and other feel less defined. You might glimpse the energetic patterns underlying form, or intuitively sense that events and material structures are manifestations of deeper, unseen forces. This awareness doesn't lead to rejection of the physical world, but invites a profound recontextualization. Life becomes less about manipulating the material and more about understanding the source from which all matter flows. As this realization deepens, certainty grows. The truest aspects of existence are not what you can touch or measure, but what moves silently behind every appearance. As the soul nears the culmination of its earthly experience, a striking realization emerges, the recognition that personal identity is not the ultimate truth, but a temporary costume worn for a time. Rather than clinging to the narrative of a singular self, you begin to witness your name, history, and personality as useful but ultimately fleeting expressions. Neville Goddard described entering a level of awareness beyond the boundaries of individuality, a vast state where the idea of being a separate I dissolves into a broader, limitless consciousness. In his view, those approaching the end of reincarnation cycles start to touch this state while still inhabiting physical form, holding two perspectives at once, the personal and the infinite. This shift isn't about rejecting yourself or negating your uniqueness. It's about recognizing that your personal story is like a song temporarily sung, not the eternal singer behind it. Attributes such as career, background, likes, and dislikes once seemed to define you. Now they appear as roles, briefly inhabited. You notice that emotions, thoughts, and even long-standing traits move through you without owning you. There is a growing detachment, not from life, but from the illusion that life is limited to one narrow identity. Rather than experiencing selfhood as rigid and fixed, you begin to sense it as fluid, expansive, and deeply interconnected with all other expressions of consciousness. The I becomes less a fortress and more a window through which the infinite looks at itself in countless forms. This expanded awareness doesn't strip you of individuality. Instead, it enriches your experience of being alive. You are both the character in the story and the silent witness to all stories unfolding simultaneously. In this realization, existence itself takes on a different hue. The dramas of life still play out, but their hold loosens. Love deepens. Fear diminishes. Isao. Quiet joy grows. The joy of remembering what you were before you were anyone at all. As the soul approaches the threshold of its final earthly cycle, an extraordinary shift occurs. Empathy expands beyond familiar boundaries, touching every form of existence. No longer confined to human relationships, compassion spills outward, embracing animals, plants, and even the seemingly lifeless stones beneath your feet. Neville Goddard spoke of a state where separateness fades, and all life is recognized as a singular expression of consciousness. In this awareness, suffering and joy cease to belong to others. They become intimately yours without division. The line between self and other blurs until only shared beingness remains. This isn't an intellectual idea or a moral obligation. It unfolds naturally, without effort. You find yourself moved by the smallest gestures, the quiet beauty of unnoticed moments, the silent endurance of creatures long ignored. Ethical living no longer feels like a duty. It becomes as effortless as breathing. Kindness flows, not because it's expected, but because harming anything feels as unnatural as wounding your own hand. The pain of another ripples through your own awareness, not as guilt or pity, but as a recognition of your shared essence. Even beyond living beings, you may sense presence in what the world calls inanimate, an old tree, a mountain, a quiet river stone. All carry within them the silent song of being, and you begin to hear it everywhere. Neville Goddard suggested that reaching this level of interconnectedness was essential for the soul's final liberation from repeated lifetimes. Without this deep acknowledgement of unity, true freedom remains incomplete. As this boundless compassion blooms, judgment withers. There is no longer a need to divide the world into good and bad, worthy and unworthy. Everything becomes sacred. Every breath, every tear, every smile a reflection of the same infinite life moving through countless forms. In this recognition, service arises not from obligation, but from joy, a quiet celebration of belonging to everything that is. A defining characteristic of souls approaching the closure of their earthly journeys is the effortless release from long-standing patterns, where once emotional triggers, habitual behaviors, and deep-rooted fears might have seemed unbreakable. Now they dissolve naturally, almost without struggle. Neville Goddard described this phenomenon as the final completion of karmic lessons. Instead of battling with the same obstacles over and over, you begin to move through challenges with surprising ease, addressing them at their core rather than wrestling with their symptoms. Change no longer requires immense willpower or endless repetition. Instead, transformation happens subtly, like the gentle fading of a dream as you wake into a brighter reality. Old addictions, toxic relationships, and self-defeating thoughts lose their grip, not because you fight them harder, but because you outgrow them. You may notice situations that once triggered anger or fear now pass by without stirring inner turbulence. Connections with others naturally evolve, shifting into greater harmony or quietly drifting apart without bitterness. Long-standing doubts and anxieties seem to evaporate as understanding deepens. Neville Goddard spoke of how, in these final stages, learning accelerates. Lessons that might once have taken many lifetimes to absorb are now integrated within years, even months. The soul no longer needs to repeat experiences endlessly. Instead, it extracts the essence swiftly, retaining the wisdom while releasing the drama. This evolution doesn't mean living without mistakes or hardships. Rather, it brings a new relationship to imperfection, one rooted in acceptance rather than resistance. Challenges are seen not as failures, but as invitations to remember more deeply who you truly are. As these 9 signs weave into your daily experience, a profound integration begins to unfold. Life feels less like a series of lessons to endure, and more like a process of gentle remembering, a return to the infinite being you always were, beneath the layers of story and conditioning. What Neville Goddard hinted at was not an ending, in the traditional sense, but an expansion, the soul stepping beyond limitation, carrying the richness of countless lifetimes into a state beyond time itself. Whether you see these patterns in yourself or simply feel drawn to this exploration, know that awakening is not a race or a contest. It is a remembering, a deepening presence with whatever life offers. If your journey truly is nearing its final turn, it is not separation you will feel, but greater connection, a heartfelt unity with all that has ever been and all that will ever be. In today's journey, we explored the signs that a soul may be nearing its final cycle. From feeling detached, experiencing vivid déjà vu, to breaking free from old patterns and seeing life through the eyes of unity. If these moments spoke, to you, know that you're awakening to something timeless within. Here's your challenge. Each day this week, notice one moment where you felt more connected to everything around you and write it down. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, and share in the comments which sign resonated most with your path. Let's grow together, remembering who we truly are.